What's she doing? What's she doing? Drain the... Oh my god, you're killing me, woman. Hiya, drain the...
The rice.
She draining rice with colander. Hi.
Why did Uncle Roger's reaction to a rice cooking tutorial by a British show go so viral? Why did millions of people, Asians and non-Asians alike, find it instantly funny and oddly satisfying? Because maybe it wasn't just about food. Maybe it tapped into a much bigger frustration. A frustration that Singaporean thinker Kishore Mahbubani once captured with one sharp question. Can Asians think? And believe it or not, the answer might be hiding in Uncle Roger's.
Hiya.
Welcome to the Take Tank, where we try to look beyond hot takes and ask the bigger questions shaping economy, politics, and culture. Today, we're asking, what does a comedian roasting egg fried rice have to do with Asia's struggle for cultural and intellectual authority? Uncle Roger didn't just make a funny reaction, he struck a nerve that turned him into an online icon. To those who don't know, this breakout video was a reaction to a BBC food cooking tutorial. The host, now Auntie Hersha, confidently taught the world how to cook egg fried rice, and then drained a wet, gloopy rice with a colander. Some say it's about who's allowed to cook what food, or taste preferences. Perhaps the outrage is something deeper than this. Because how about pineapples on pizza? Or Filipinos adding sugar to spaghetti? Or the Japanese reinventing curry? Just because some of them are Asians doesn't mean they get a free pass if we use this argument. These are acculturation via fusion or adaptation in cuisine. Cultures are mixing each other. What BBC Food did was something else, confidently teaching a correct way of cooking rice while getting the most basic thing wrong. For Asians, rice isn't just food, it's daily life, it's family, culture, identity. Cooking a perfect rice is learned at home at a very young age. No colander, no measuring cup, a finger is enough. So for many Asians, a British show is in no position to teach the wrong way of cooking rice. It's not just his character is an exaggeration of every Asian uncle trope and love for MSG. This is how it feels when the world treats you as if you don't know your own basics kind of feeling. This feeling isn't new. Before social media, there was Mabubani's question. Can Asians think? Back in 1998, Singaporean diplomat Kishore Mahbubani provoked the Western world, which for centuries had positioned itself as the world's teacher in politics, economics, and even philosophy. Let's dive into the essay itself. First published in 1998 and then expanded in the early 2000s. His provocation was simple but sharp. After centuries of Western dominance, could Asians generate original ideas or were they forever destined to imitate? Can they develop on their own way? First, civilizational superiority was just the surface. Colonialism and the Industrial Revolution are best friends that drove Western hegemony. In 19th century America, there was this idea that the US was destined by God to take land westward across North America and later imperialism abroad. It's called the Manifest Destiny, but its first full-blown overseas test was applied in the Philippine Islands, where Manifest Destiny jumped from a continental idea into a global imperial one. In Europe, Rudyard Kipling invented the concept of white man's burden. It frames colonialism as a duty, the West's job to civilize others. It dressed up domination as charity. Both claimed empire was a mission, not exploitation. Colonialism was portrayed as teaching, guiding, and uplifting of non-Euro-Americans or uncivilized peoples. The words are gone, but the feeling of intellectual dominion lingers, even in something as simple as the British teaching people how to cook rice. Honestly, Can't they ask some Asian? Hey, can you teach us how to cook rice? Your ancestors have perfected it for centuries. Is it colonial arrogance? Maybe ignorance, boiling and draining rice like pasta. Or maybe out of habit. Once European cookbooks lacked in that way, it got repeated even when it turned rice into sad, red, gloopy mush. The West's edge came not only from ships and guns, but from the Industrial Revolution, steam, steel, and factories. But that revolution wasn't self contained, it was fueled by empires. Colonies provided resources, labor, and markets that amplified Europe's industrial might. Alongside that came ideology, religion, and propaganda that told colonized peoples they were inferior, irrational, incapable of thinking for themselves. This psychological conquest mattered as much as military conquest. Today, the script has flipped. Asia is full of strong, mobilized states, from China's one party model to the noisy and unique versions of democracies in India and Indonesia. Economically, Asia is driving a new kind of industrial revolution. The region now produces over half of the world's manufacturing output. China alone accounts for almost 30% of global manufacturing, more than the US, Japan, and Germany combined. The West once mythologized its rise as destiny. Asia today shows it was history. If anything, the problem now is that states are hyperactive, sometimes too strong, as their dissenters and civil society. Second, competition and expansion. Europe's strength came from rivalry. Asia's strength today comes from scale. Mahbubani pointed out that Europe's internal competition pushed nations outward, scrambling for resources and trade routes. That competition built empires. Today, Asia is the arena of global competition. From the US-China fight over semiconductors, to India's push as the world's tech hub, to Southeast Asia's booming economies and geopolitical centrality, where global powers play. Taiwan leads globally in chips, and tiny Singapore punches above its weight as a financial hub. China and India are global giants, while ASEAN has become the fifth largest economy in the world, worth over $4 trillion. But the Asian century is a work in progress. Growth is uneven. Poverty declined over the past few decades, but it remains a persistent challenge. South Asia still has over 400 million people living on less than $3.65 a day. Third, governance and democracy. Asia proves democracy is not the single political recipe for development. Mahbubani challenged the Western assumption that democracy was the only legitimate model. The end of history, liberal democracy won, to quote American political scientist Francis Fukuyama. Succeeding research has long questioned whether democracy can flourish in poor or institutionally weak societies. Seymour Martin Lipset's Some Social Requisites of Democracy, Economic Development, and Political Legitimacy, published in 1959, argued that higher income, stronger institutions, and widespread education make democracy far more likely to survive. In Democracy and Development by a team led by Adam Chbosky in 2000 showed that democracy in very poor countries are fragile, but once a country's GDP per capita passes a certain threshold, democracy could work. More recent studies like Asimoglu and Robinson's Why Nations Fail in 2012 emphasize that without inclusive institutions, democracy risks being hollow. Formal elections without broad-based development. Together, they suggest that democracy isn't a universal shortcut to progress. Its success depends heavily on underlying social and institutional foundations. Mahbubani argued that Asia's traditions offer their own paths, The former South Korean President Kim Dae-jung, in his critique of Singapore's Lee Kuan Yew, pointed out that China's Confucianism already contained democratic elements. Fast forward to today, China's model, socialism with Chinese characteristics, has delivered growth, lifting over 800 million people out of poverty since 1980, a hybrid of a one-party control and market-driven economic reforms. India is the world's largest democracy and used to be among the poorest ones in attempting democracy on such a scale at an early stage. This enabled coalition politics, regional parties, and constant elections, a not very ideal democracy that slowed down reform until it shifted from the state led license Raj to market liberalization in the 90s. Now, it is the fifth largest economy in the world. Across Southeast Asia, hybrids of democracy and authoritarianism persist. The point is, there's no single teacher of governance and no single model that guarantees success. Fourth, culture and soft power. If the 19th century was Europe's industrial century, the 21st may be Asia's cultural century. At the time Mahbubani wrote, the West still monopolized cultural authority. Colonialism stole artifacts. The Rosetta Stone of Egypt, Nigeria's Benin bronzes, that won Athena, and the Parthenon marbles of the Greek, Magdala manuscripts taken from Ethiopia, India's Tipu's tiger, the jewelries and the infamous Koh-i-Noor diamond adorning the queen's crown, and many more recorded and unrecorded, priceless cultural treasures around the world that are in the British Museum. What will be left of the British Museum if it returns pieces of history to their rightful owners? But today, Asia has flipped the script. Its soft power, or the ability to influence others through non-military means such as cultural appeal, are indigenous, pluralistic, and hybrids of Eastern and Western cultures. South Korea's cultural exports, led by K-pop, are worth over $12 billion a year. Anime makes up 60% of the world's animated shows. Bollywood produces up to 2,000 films annually, the largest in the world. Asian food, fashion, and aesthetics shape global taste. Cultural soft power has become one of Asia's clearest answers to Mabubani's question. Finally, nationalism and identity. With self confidence comes pride and sometimes danger. Mabubani predicted a rise in Asian self confidence, modernization, as scholars like Benedict Anderson and Ernest Gellner showed, fuels nationalism. And today, that's visible everywhere. Modest India, sees China, Duterte's Philippines. Leaders use history and symbols to project pride and legitimacy. This is empowering but also destabilizing. Proof that Asians can think, but also a reminder that ideas like rice can be cooked badly. So, where does this leave us? Mabubani's question still matters, not because Asians cannot think, but because the world is still learning to listen. But Mabubani himself was careful. He ended his essay with a series of maybes, reminders that Asia's rise is not automatic. 2 decades later, we can see all of this maybes playing out. Maybe corruption and inequality will stall progress. Maybe democracy isn't the universal answer, but authoritarianism carries risks of its own. The Uyghurs and Tibetans can say more about this. India is vibrant, but struggles with inequality and governance gaps. ASEAN has lifted millions out of poverty, but unevenly. And across the region, we see both pride and peril in appeals to Asian values. And maybe, just maybe, Asian values can offer genuine alternatives if they are lived, tested, and proven, not just invoked as slogans. Makubani's essay wasn't a conclusion, it was a provocation. The playing field has shifted. Asian economies rival the West. Asian culture rivals Hollywood. Asian politics run on diverse logics. Yet the old narratives of inferiority have not vanished. They resurface every time Asia is misrepresented, whether in a history book, an international debate, or even a BBC Foods egg fried rice tutorial. And that's why Uncle Rogers
Hiya.
still land so well. It's not just about rice, it's about who gets to decide whose knowledge counts, whether that's cooking rice, making the perfect adobo, or deciding whether democracy is truly universal. Kishore Mahbubani and Uncle Roger, one academic, one comedic, show how the West still often gets Asia wrong, even something as simple as cooking rice. Can Asians think? Of course. But Asians still feel the pressure to prove they belong, like in academia or media. The internet changed the game. Creators like Korean mukbang streamers, Uncle Roger, Redman Rock, they bypass Western gatekeepers completely. Uncle Roger's character is a reminder that yes, Asians can think, teach, and define culture. And sometimes, the most powerful way to show that is by making the whole world laugh. Comedy can reveal power dynamics. It's satire. What's your take? Can Asians think? Are we still stuck in a world where the West assumes it's always a teacher? Comment down below. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the Take Tank to help us continue the mission of delivering critically informed and independent storytelling about things that matter.